Dale was a simple man who did not look for trouble. He worked his small farm at the edge of Ashwood Forest, grew what he could, and raised his daughter Meg on his own. Meg was 8 years old, small for her age, with a serious face and big brown eyes that never missed anything. She had her mother's eyes. Dale tried not to think about that too much. That evening, the two of them were walking the forest path home after checking the wood traps Dale had set near the creek. The sun was going down fast and the air had turned cold. Meg walked beside him, her hand wrapped around 2 fingers of his left hand the way she always did when the forest got dark. They were almost at the edge of the trees when Meg stopped. She did not say anything at first. She just stopped walking and stared to the left toward the low ground near the stream. "Papa," she said quietly. "Something is there." Dale looked. At first he thought it was a pile of dark rocks near the water. The shape was long and low, half covered by ferns and broken branches. But then he saw something move. A slow rise. A slow fall. Like breathing but heavy and labored. He stepped off the path and moved closer. The shape grew bigger as he got closer. Much bigger. He could see the scales now, dark green, almost black, but dry and dull in a way that healthy scales never were. He could see the long neck stretched flat against the mud. He could see the claws, pale at the tips, half curled in the dirt. It was a dragon. A young one. Female by the shape of the jaw and the curve of the horns. But young, not a hatchling but not fully grown either. And she was in terrible shape. Her ribs pushed hard against her skin. The hollows behind her shoulders were deep. Her tail lay flat and still. There was mud caked around her mouth and her nose, which told Dale she had fallen face down and had not had the strength to lift herself back up for a long time. He crouched down a few feet away from her head. Her eye opened. It was gold. Deep, bright gold, even now, even through all the exhaustion. It moved slowly until it found him. Then it stayed on him. She tried to lift her head. She could not do it. A sound came from her throat. Low and rough. It was meant to be a warning. Dale could tell that much. But there was nothing behind it. No heat, no strength. Just the memory of what a warning was supposed to sound like. "Easy," Dale said. He kept his voice the same way he used it with frightened animals. Low and steady and calm. "Easy. I am not going to hurt you." The gold eye stayed on him. Meg came up beside him. She had not stayed back the way he probably should have told her to. She crouched down next to Dale and looked at the dragon with those serious eyes of hers. "She is starving, Papa," Meg said. "Yes," Dale said. Meg looked at her father. "We have to help her." Dale did not answer right away. He looked at the dragon. He looked at the ribs. He looked at the mud around her mouth and the dull, cracked scales and the way her breathing came in slow, hard pulls like every breath cost her something. He thought about the walk home. He thought about the size of her. He thought about how little sense this made and how much work it was going to be. Then he thought about how Meg had said it. Not as a question. As a fact. We have to help her. Dale stood up and took off his outer jacket. He looked around at the broken branches nearby. "All right," he said. "Here is what we are going to do. You are going to walk beside her head and keep talking to her. Use your quiet voice. Let her hear you. Can you do that?" Meg nodded right away. "Papa," she said. "Yes." "What do I say to her?" Dale thought about it for a second. "Tell her where we are going. Tell her it is not far. Tell her she is going to be all right." Meg turned to the dragon and crouched down close to her eye line. She folded her hands in her lap the way she did when she was being very serious about something. "We are going to take you to our house," Meg said to the dragon in a low, careful voice. "It is not far. Maybe 10 minutes if we go slow. Papa will cook something when we get there. He is a very good cook. The best I know." The dragon's gold eye moved to the little girl. Stayed there. Dale moved to the dragon's side and began the slow, careful work of helping her up. She was heavy. Much heavier than she looked. Her legs shook when they touched the ground. She slipped twice. Dale caught her both times with his shoulder and held her steady without making a sound about it. Meg kept talking the whole time. Soft and steady, just like Dale had said. It took a long time to cover those 10 minutes of path. They stopped 4 times to let the dragon rest. The stars were out by the time the farmhouse came into view through the trees. When the dragon finally made it to the yard and lowered herself to the ground with a long, exhausted breath, Meg looked up at Dale. "I will get the big pot," she said. Dale put his hand on top of her head for a moment. "Good girl," he said. Then he went inside to start the fire. You said, Part 2. The first warm meal. Dale cooked everything he had, roasted meat, thick broth and root vegetables, and brought it out to the dragon in the Dale built the fire high that night. He moved around his small kitchen the way he always did when he had a purpose. quietly without wasted steps. He pulled the salted meat from the smokehouse. He brought out the root vegetables from the cold box. He filled the big pot with water and hung it over the fire and let it start to heat while he worked on everything else. Meg sat at the kitchen table and watched him. "How much does a dragon eat?" she asked. "More than us," Dale said. "How much more?" Dale glanced out the window toward the yard where the dragon lay in the dark. "We're going to find out." He cut the meat into large pieces and put half of it in the pot for broth and put the other half on the flat iron pan over the second burner to roast. He added the root vegetables to the broth, carrots, turnips, 2 large onions, and let everything cook slow and low the way his father had taught him. Good food did not need to be rushed. It just needed time and heat and a little care. The smell filled the kitchen fast. Rich and warm and heavy with fat and salt. Meg closed her eyes for a second and breathed it in. Then she opened them and looked at the window again. "Do you think she can smell it from out there?" Dale turned the meat on the pan. It hissed and spat. "She has a better nose than either of us. She smelled it before I even started." Meg got up from the table and pressed her face to the glass. The dragon was still lying in the same spot in the yard. But her head was up now. Just slightly. Her long neck was lifted off the ground and her nose was pointed toward the house. Her gold eyes caught the light from the kitchen window and held it. "She is awake," Meg said. "I know," Dale said. He cooked for a long time. He made more than he had ever made for just the two of them. He used the big wooden feed trough from the barn, scrubbed it clean and filled it with the broth and the vegetables and the large pieces of roasted meat. It was not a fancy meal. It was a farmer's meal. Simple and filling and made with everything he had left in the house. He carried it out to the yard in 2 trips. The night air was cold and sharp. His breath made clouds in front of him. The dragon watched him come across the yard with the trough, her head low, her eyes tracking every step he took. Dale set the trough down about 3 feet in front of her and stepped back. Then he waited. The dragon looked at the food. She did not move right away. She just looked at it. Her nose dropped toward it slowly and she breathed in the smell. Her eyes moved from the trough to Dale and then back to the trough again. There was something in her face that Dale had not expected to see. It was not hunger. Well, it was hunger, but it was something else underneath the hunger. Something careful and confused and almost lost. Like she did not understand what was happening. Like no one had ever just put food in front of her before without wanting something in return. Dale said nothing. He just stood back with his hands in his pockets and gave her time. Meg came out of the house behind him. She had a thick wool blanket from the chest by the door, the big heavy one that Dale used in the cold months. She walked around the side of the dragon slowly and quietly and laid it across the dragon's back and side, pulling it as far as she could reach. The blanket did not cover much. The dragon was too large for that. But Meg smoothed it down carefully at the edges as if it mattered, because to her it did. The dragon turned her head and looked at the little girl. Meg looked back at her and smiled. Just a small smile. Then she stepped back and stood beside her father. The dragon turned back to the food. She lowered her head. She took the first bite slowly, carefully, like she was not sure it was real. Then something shifted. The slowness fell away. She ate the way a creature eats when it has been without food for so long that the body stops asking and starts demanding. She ate fast and low and without stopping, her jaw working through the meat and the vegetables and the broth, the sound of it filling the quiet yard. Dale watched and said nothing. When the trough was empty, she lifted her head and looked at him. Dale picked up the trough and went back inside without a word. He filled it again. Brought it back out. Set it down. Stepped back. She ate that too. He filled it a third time. By the time that one was gone, the sharp desperation had left her. She was still hungry, Dale could see that, but the edge was off. She lowered her head slowly to the ground and let out a long breath through her nose that stirred the dirt in front of her. Dale picked up the empty trough. Meg had not moved from her spot. She was watching the dragon with those steady brown eyes of hers. "She never said thank you," Meg said quietly. "She did not need to," Dale said. Meg thought about that for a moment. Then she nodded like it made sense to her. Dale looked at the dragon one more time. Her eyes were closed now. Her breathing was slower and deeper than it had been by the stream. The blanket rose and fell with her side. He put his hand on Meg's shoulder. "Come inside," he said. "Let her sleep." Dale was up before the sun. He always was. Old habit from years of farm work. He dressed quietly, put the kettle on, and looked out the kitchen window while the water heated. The dragon was still there in the yard. He had half expected her to be gone. He was not sure why. Maybe because things that big and that wild did not usually stay in small yards next to small farmhouses. But she was still there, lying on her side now, the wool blanket still draped across her middle. Her breathing was slow and even. The kind of breathing that meant real sleep. Deep sleep. The kind a body falls into when it has finally been fed and warmed and left alone to rest. Dale made his tea and stood at the window and watched her for a while. By the time Meg came padding into the kitchen in her socks, rubbing her eyes, the sun was just starting to come up over the tree line. "Is she still there?" Meg asked before she even looked. "Still there," Dale said. Meg came to the window and pressed her nose against the glass. The dragon's eye opened. Not both of them. Just the one facing the house. That deep gold eye opened slowly and found the window and found the small face pressed against it. Stayed there. Watching. Meg lifted her hand and waved. The dragon blinked. Dale put a plate of bread and butter on the table for Meg and went to the door. He pulled on his boots and his jacket and stepped out into the cold morning air. The grass was white with frost. His breath came out in long, slow clouds. He walked across the yard and stopped a few feet from the dragon's head. Her eye followed him the whole way. He crouched down to her level. Not because he needed to. Just because it felt right. Less like standing over her. "Morning," he said. The dragon looked at him. Then something happened that he had not heard from her yet. Her mouth opened slightly. And she spoke. Her voice was low and rough from disuse, like a door that had not been opened in a long time. But the words were clear. "Morning," she said back. Dale nodded like this was completely normal. Like dragons spoke to him every morning in his yard. "How are you feeling?" he asked. She was quiet for a moment. Like she was actually checking. Taking stock of herself from the inside. "Better," she said. "Than yesterday." "Good," Dale said. He did not push for more. He just stayed crouched there in the cold morning air and gave her space to say what she wanted to say or nothing at all. He was a patient man. He had learned that patience was just respect wearing work clothes. After a while she spoke again. "My name is Syra," she said. "Dale," he said. "And the one in the window is Meg. My daughter." Syra's eye moved to the kitchen window. Meg was still there, watching with both hands pressed to the glass now. Something moved across Syra's face. Not quite a smile. Dragons did not smile the way people did. But something softened there. Something around the eyes. Then it was gone and she looked back at Dale. "I should tell you what I am," she said. "Since you fed me. Since you brought me here." "You do not have to," Dale said. "I want to," she said. And the way she said it made Dale think that she did not often get to decide what she wanted. He waited. Syra took a slow breath. When she spoke, she kept her eyes on the frost-covered ground in front of her, not on him. "I am the third daughter of the Dragon Queen," she said. "My mother rules the mountain ranges to the north. My two elder sisters will rule after her. I was never meant to rule anything." Dale said nothing. He just listened. "My sisters decided I was too weak," Syra continued. Her voice was flat and careful, like she had told this story to herself many times and learned how to say it without feeling it. "Too small for my age. Too slow to grow. They said I was an embarrassment to the bloodline. My mother did not disagree." She paused. "They drove me out 3 weeks ago. Told me not to come back until I had proven myself. Or not to come back at all." The yard was very quiet. Somewhere in the forest a bird started to call and then stopped. "I tried to hunt," Syra said. "I was never taught properly. My sisters did not share those lessons with me. I caught very little. What little I caught did not last. I kept moving because stopping felt like giving up and I was not ready to give up." She finally looked at him. "And then I fell by the stream," she said. "And I could not get back up." Dale looked at her for a long moment. He thought about what it took to say all of that. He thought about a young creature wandering alone through cold forest for 3 weeks, too proud to ask for help, too stubborn to stop. He thought about Meg saying we have to help her like it was the most obvious thing in the world. He stood up slowly and put his hands in his jacket pockets. "Syra," he said. She looked at him. "Are you still hungry?" She blinked. Like the question had caught her completely off guard. Like she had been bracing for something else entirely, judgment or pity or more questions she did not want to answer. Her voice when it came was very quiet. "Yes," she said. Dale nodded and turned back toward the house. "Then let me make breakfast," he said. The days settled into a rhythm. Dale cooked in the morning and cooked in the evening and did not make a thing of it. He simply made more than he used to make and brought the extra out to the yard the same way he brought everything else, quietly and without ceremony. Porridge and bread in the morning. Meat and broth and vegetables in the evening. Simple food. Honest food. The kind that did not try to be anything more than what it was. Syra ate everything he brought. At first she ate the way she had that first night, fast and low like something might take it from her. But after a few days that changed. She started eating slower. She started lifting her head between bites and looking around the yard and breathing the morning air. She started tasting things instead of just consuming them. Dale noticed but said nothing. On the fourth morning Syra stood up on her own for the first time without her legs shaking. She stood in the middle of the yard and stretched her neck long and spread her wings just slightly and then folded them back. She looked at her own front claws for a moment. Then she looked at Dale, who was watching from the porch with his mug. "Better?" she said. "Yes," he agreed. Her scales were changing too. The dull cracked look was fading. The dark green was coming back, deep and clean, catching the morning light the way healthy scales did. Her eyes were clearer. The cloudiness that had been in them by the stream was gone. She was eating herself back to life, and it showed. On the fifth day she did something Dale had not asked for and had not expected. He was at the far end of the property trying to shift a large oak that had fallen across the fence line in the last storm. It was too big for one man. He had been working at it for 2 hours with the axe and had made progress but not enough. His back was hurting and his hands were raw. He heard the ground shake slightly behind him. He turned around. Syra walked past him without a word, lowered her head, put her shoulder against the fallen oak and pushed. The tree shifted. She adjusted her footing and pushed again. The oak rolled clear of the fence line and came to rest in the grass on the other side with a heavy thud that shook the ground. She straightened up and looked at him. Dale looked at the tree. Then at her. Then at the tree again. "Thank you," he said. Syra turned and walked back toward the yard. It became a pattern after that. She did not ask what needed doing. She just watched, and when she saw something she could help with, she helped with it. She cleared 2 more fallen trees that week. She used her tail to flatten the long grass near the east fence that Dale never had time to cut. On cold mornings she would breathe a long, slow breath of warm air across the yard, and the frost would melt and the ground would be soft enough to work. She did all of it without being asked. Without being thanked. She simply did it and went back to her spot and lay down. Dale understood. She was not doing it to pay a debt. She was doing it because it was her yard now too. Meg was the one who got closest to her. It started small. Meg would come out in the afternoons and sit near Syra while she read her books. She did not talk much. She just sat there the way children sometimes do with animals they trust, comfortable in the quiet. Syra would lie with her head turned slightly so one gold eye could rest on the little girl while she read. One afternoon Meg looked up from her book and asked, "What is it like to fly?" Syra was quiet for a moment. "Cold," she said. "And very fast. And very quiet." Meg thought about that. "Quiet? But you are moving so fast." "The world gets quiet when you are above it," Syra said. "Everything down here sounds far away." Meg looked up at the sky. "I think I would like that," she said. Syra looked at the little girl for a long time after that. She did not say anything more, but something in her face was different. Softer. Like a wall that had been standing for a long time had developed a small crack in it and the light was coming through. Dale saw it. He did not remark on it. He just kept cooking. One evening after supper Syra was lying in the yard watching the tree line the way she had started doing in the evenings, her eyes moving slow and steady along the edge of the forest. Watchful. Like she was keeping an eye on things. Dale came out to collect the trough and stopped beside her. "You do not have to do that," he said. "I know," she said. "You are not obligated to watch over this place." Syra turned her head and looked at him. "I am not doing it because I am obligated." Dale looked at her. "This is my territory," she said. Simply. Quietly. Like it was a fact she had only recently discovered and was still getting used to the sound of it. Dale picked up the trough. He thought about a dragon princess driven out of her mountain home and told she was not enough. He thought about how she had come to a small farm at the edge of a forest and been fed and left alone and given time and space to become herself again. He thought about how belonging did not always look like what people expected it to look like. Sometimes it looked like a shared meal. Sometimes it looked like a cleared fence line. Sometimes it looked like a little girl sitting quietly with a book while a dragon watched over her like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Good night, Syra," Dale said. "Good night, Dale," she said. He went inside. She watched the tree line. And the farm was quiet and safe and whole. It was an ordinary morning when the messenger came. Dale was at the fire-making porch. Meg was outside sitting on the porch steps pulling on her boots. Syra was in the yard watching the tree line the way she did every morning, slow and steady, her scales catching the early light. Then she went still. Not the normal stillness of a creature at rest. Something different. Tighter. Her head came up slowly and her eyes fixed on the edge of the forest, and she did not move at all. Dale saw it through the kitchen window. He put down the spoon and came to the door. A dragon came out of the trees. He was large. Larger than Syra. His scales were a deep polished red and they were perfect. Not a crack or a dull patch anywhere. Around his neck he wore a band of dark metal etched with markings that Dale did not recognize but understood to mean something official. Something important. He walked into the yard like he owned it. He looked at the farmhouse. He looked at the small garden and the fence and the woodpile and the weathered porch. His expression did not change, but something in his eyes said exactly what he thought of what he was seeing. Meg stood up slowly from the porch steps. She looked at the red dragon and then at Syra, and then she walked across the yard and stood beside Syra without anyone telling her to. She put her hand against Syra's front leg the way she always did when she stood next to her. Syra did not look down at her. She kept her eyes on the messenger. The red dragon stopped a short distance away. When he spoke his voice was loud and formal and flat, like someone reading from a page. Syra, third daughter of the Dragon Queen. You are called to return to the mountain ranges to face judgment for abandoning your bloodline and your obligations. Your mother has granted you one opportunity to come back and answer for what you have done. Syra said nothing. The messenger looked around the yard again. His gaze moved over Dale on the porch and then to Meg standing at Syra's side. Something crossed his face. Not quite disgust. Something colder than that. You have been living here, he said. The formality dropped from his voice. With them. In this place. Still Syra said nothing. The messenger looked at Meg the way someone looks at something that does not make sense to them. A human child, he said quietly. Almost to himself. You have been living in a human's yard like a kept animal and standing beside their children. Meg looked up at Syra. Syra looked at the messenger. And then she moved. She did not move fast. She did not lunge or spread her wings or make any sudden motion. She simply stood up. Fully. All the way. She drew herself up to her complete height and her wings opened just slightly at the shoulders the way they did when she was at rest but alert. Her scales caught the morning sun and threw the light back hard and bright and clean. She was not the creature that had been found by the stream 3 weeks ago. The hollow spaces were gone. The dull cracked scales were gone. The weakness was gone. She stood in that small farmyard and she was every inch what she had always been under the hunger and the exhaustion and the shame her family had piled onto her. She was a dragon. The messenger took one small step back. He covered it quickly. He straightened and lifted his chin and waited. When Syra spoke her voice was low and steady and very clear. I heard you, she said. I will not be coming back. The messenger blinked. That is not a choice you are permitted to. I have already made it, Syra said. 3 weeks ago when I walked away from the mountain. I made it again every morning since then. I am making it now. You are abandoning your bloodline, the messenger said. You are abandoning your name. Everything you were born to. I was born to nothing, Syra said. My sisters made that clear. My mother made that clear. I was not given a territory. I was not given lessons. I was not given any of the things a daughter of the queen should be given. I was given a direction to walk and told not to come back weak. She paused. So I did not, she said. I am not weak. And I am not coming back. The messenger looked at Dale on the porch. Then at Meg beside Syra. Then back at Syra. This is your territory, he said slowly, like he was trying to understand it. This farm. These humans. Yes, Syra said. That is all you claim. It is enough, she said. It is more than enough. The messenger stood there for a moment longer. Something moved behind his eyes. Dale could not tell what it was. Maybe he was going to argue again. Maybe he was going to threaten. Maybe he was going to say something that would require a different kind of answer. But he did not. He turned and walked back toward the tree line without another word. His red scales disappeared into the shadows of the forest and then he was gone and the yard was quiet again. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Meg reached up and wrapped both her small hands around Syra's front claw the way she always did. She did not say anything. She just held on. Syra looked down at her. She looked at the small hands holding her claw. She looked at Meg's serious brown eyes looking back up at her without any fear in them at all. Then she looked at Dale on the porch. He had not moved the whole time. He stood with his hands in his pockets and his shoulder against the door frame and he looked back at her the same way he always did. Steady. Quiet. Certain. Like she had always belonged there. Syra felt something move through her chest that she had never felt before. It was not pride the way she had understood pride before, sharp and cold and always looking over its shoulder. This was something warmer than that. something that did not need to prove itself to anyone. She lowered her head gently until it was level with Meg's face. Meg smiled at her. For the first time in her life, Syra understood what it meant to be royalty. Not the mountain kind. Not the bloodline kind. The kind that is chosen. The kind that is earned. The kind that a little girl with serious eyes and a man with a cooking pot had given her without ever once meaning to. She breathed out slowly and the morning air was warm around them. And the farm was home.